All right, shall we? How are y'all? Looks like everything is working. Let's check the. All right. Yep, looks like we have excellent reception, whatever you want to call it. Hi. Are you done licking my arm forever? I cannot itch your back and read at the same time. No, I can't. What? Goofball. I'm trying to read. I guess I have to itch a puppy's backside before I can. What? What? Good gracious. All right. All right, so we left off with Mike Noonan thinking of Kia or Kaya. It's season's beginnings. And before he could cry, he decided that he was going to walk into the village cafe and hope that it just kept it away for right now. So we're just going to read, shall we? Chapter 8. Buddy Jellison was just the same, all right. Same dirty cook's whites and splotchy white apron. Same black hair under a paper cap stained with either beef blood or strawberry juice. Even from the look, the same oatmeal cookie crumbs caught in his ragged mustache. He was maybe 55 and maybe 70, which in some genetically favored men seems to be still within the farthest borders of middle age. He was huge and shambly, probably 6'4", 300 pounds, and just full of grace, wit, and joie de vivre, as he had been 4 years before. You want a menu, or do you remember, he grunted, as if I'd last been in yesterday. You still make the Village Burger Deluxe? Does a crow still shit in the pine tops? Pale eyes regarding me, no condolences, which was fine by me. Most likely, I'll have one with everything, a village burger, not a crow. Plus a chocolate frappe. Good to see you again. I offered my hand. He looked surprised, but touched it with his own. Unlike the whites, the apron, and the hat, the hand was clean. Even the nails were clean. Yeah, he said. Then turned to the sallow woman chopping onions beside the grill. Village burger, Audrey, he said. Drag it through the garden. I'm ordinarily a sit-at-the-counter kind of guy, but that day I took a booth near the cooler and waited for Buddy to yell that it was ready. Audrey short orders, but she doesn't waitress. I wanted to think, and Buddy's was a good place to do it. There was a couple of locals eating sandwiches and drinking sodas straight from the can, but that was about it. People with summer cottages would have to be starving to eat at the village cafe. And even then, you'd likely have to haul them through the door kicking and screaming. The floor was faded green linoleum with a rolling topography of hills and valleys. Like Buddy's uniform, it was none too clean. The summer people who came in probably failed to notice his hands. The woodwork was greasy and dark. Above it, where the plastered started, there was a number of bumper stickers, Buddy's idea of decoration. Horn broken, watch for finger. Wife and dog missing, reward for dog. I love that one. That one's funny. There's no town drunk here. We all take turns. That's great. Humor is almost always anger with its makeup on, I think. But in little towns, that makeup tends to be thin. 3 overhead fans paddled apathetically at the hot air, and to the left of the soft drink cooler were 2 dangling strips of flypaper, both liberally stifled with wildlife, some of it still struggling feebly. If you could look at these and still eat, your digestion was probably doing okay. I thought about a similarity of names, which was surely had to be a coincidence. I thought about a young, pretty girl who had become a mother at 16 or 17, and a widow at 19 or 20. I thought about inadvertently touching her breast, and how the world judged men in their 40s who suddenly discovered the fascinating world of young women and their accessories. Most of all, I thought of the queer thing that had happened to me when Maddie had told me the kid's name. That sense that my mouth and throat had suddenly flooded with cold, mineral, tangy water. That rush. When my burger was ready, Buddy had to call twice. When I went over to get it, he said, "You back to stay or to clear out?" "Why?" I asked. "Did you miss me, Buddy?" "Nope," he said. "But at least you're from in-state. Do you know what Massachusetts is Pascataka for asshole?" "Did you know that Massachusetts is Pacataca for asshole?" "You're funny as ever," I said. "Yep. I'm gonna go on fucking Letterman, explain to him why God gave seagulls wings." "Why is that, Buddy?" "So they could beat the fucking Frenchman to the dump." Ha ha! I got a newspaper from the rack and a straw for my frappe. Then I detoured to the payphone and, tucking my paper under my arm, opened the phone book. You could actually walk around with it if you wanted. It wasn't tethered to the phone. Well, who, after all, would want to steal a Castle County telephone directory? There are over 20 Devores, which didn't surprise me very much. It's one of those names, like Pelkey or Bowie or Toothaker, wow, that you kept coming across if you lived down here. I imagine it's the same everywhere. Some families breed more and travel less, that's all. There was a Devore listing for R.D. Wasp Road, but it wasn't for a Maddie, Mathilda, Martha, or M. It was for Lance. I looked at the front of the phone book and saw it was a 97 model, printed in... Okay, but there was something else about the name. Devore. Let us know, praise famous Devores. Wherefore art thou Devore? But it wouldn't come, whatever it was. I ate my burger, drank my liquefied ice cream, and tried not to look at what was caught on the flypaper. While I was waiting for the silent Audrey to give me my change, you could still eat all week at the Village Cafe for $50. If your blood vessels could stand it, that was. I read the sticker pasted on the cash register. It was another Buddy Jellison special. Cyberspace scared me so bad I downloaded in my pants. Oh, dang. That's great. This didn't exactly convulse me with mirth, but it did provide the key to solving one of the day's mysteries. Why the name Devore had seemed not just familiar, but evocative. I was financially well off, rich by the standards of many. There was at least one person with ties to the TR, however, who was rich by the standards of everybody and filthy rich by the standards of most year-round residents of the Lakes region. If that was, he was still eating, breathing, and walking around. Audrey, is Max Devore still alive? She gave me a little smile. Oh, yeah, but we don't see him in here too often. That got a laugh out of me that all of Buddy's joke stickers hadn't been able to elicit. Audrey, who had always been yellowish and who now looked like a candidate for a liver transplant, snickered herself. Buddy gave us the librarian's prim glare from the far end of the counter, where he was reading a flyer about the holiday NASCAR race at Oxford Plains. I drove back the way I'd come. A big hamburger is a bad meal to eat in the middle of a hot day. It leaves you feeling sleepy and heavy-witted. All I wanted was to go home. I'd been there less than 24 hours and was already thinking of it as home. Flop on the bed in the north bedroom under the revolving fan and sleep for a couple hours. When I passed Wasp Hill Road, I slowed down. The laundry was hanging listlessly on the lines, and there was a scatter of toys in the front yard. But the Scout was gone. Maddie and Kira had donned their suities, I imagined, and headed down to the public beachy. I'd liked them both, and quite a lot. Maddie's short-lived marriage had probably hooked her somewhere to Max Devore. But looking at the rusty double-wide trailer with its dirt driveway and balding front yard, remembering Maddie's baggy shorts and Kmart smock top, I had to doubt that the hook was a strong one. Before retiring to Palm Springs in the late 80s, Maxwell William DeVore had been a driving force in the computer revolution. It's primarily a young people's revolution, but DeVore did okay for a golden oldie. Knew the playing field and understood the rules. He started when memory was stored on magnetic tape instead of in computer chips, and a warehouse-sized cruncher called UNIVAC was state-of-the-art. He was fluent in COBOL and spoke Fortran like a native. As the field expanded beyond his ability to keep up, expanded to the point where it had begun to define the world, he bought the talent he needed to keep growing. His company, Visions, had created scanning programs which could upload hard copy onto floppy disks almost instantaneously. It created graphic imaging programs which had become the industry standard. It created Pixel Easel, which allowed laptop users to mouse paint to actually finger paint, if their gadget came equipped with what Joe had called the clitoral cursor. DeVore had invented none of the latter stuff, but he understood that it could be invented and hired people to do it. He held dozens of patents, and he co-held hundreds more. He was supposedly worth something like $600 million, depending on how technology stocks were doing on any given day. On the TR, he was reputed to be crusty and unpleasant. No surprise there. To a Nazarene, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? And folks said he was eccentric, of course. Listen to the old-timers who remember the rich and successful in their salad days, and all the old-timers claim they do. And you'll hear that they ate the wallpaper, bucked the dog, and showed up at church suppers wearing nothing but their pea-stained BVDs. Even if all that was true in DeVore's case, and even if he was Scrooge McDuck in the bargain, I doubted that he'd allow two of his close relatives to live in a double-wide trailer. I drove up the lane above the lake, then paused at the head of my driveway, looking at the sign, Sara Laughs, burned into the length of varnished wood nailed to the handy tree. To a handy tree. It's the way they do things down here. Looking at it brought back the last dream of the Manderley series. In that dream, someone had slapped a radio station sticker on the sign, the way you're always seeing stickers slapped on turnpike toll collection baskets in the exact change lanes. I got out of my car, went to the sign, and studied it. No sticker. The sunflowers had been down there, growing out of the stoop. I had a photo in my suitcase that proved it. But there was no radio station sticker on the house sign. Proving exactly what? Come on, Noonan, get a grip. I started back to the car. The door was open, and the Beach Boys spilled out of the speakers. Then changed my mind and went back to the sign again. In the dream, the sticker had been pasted just above the RA of Sarah and the LAU of Laughs. I touched my finger to that spot and thought they came away feeling slightly sticky. Of course, that could have been the feel of varnish on a hot day or in my imagination. I drove down to the house, parked, and set the emergency brake. On the slopes around Dark Score and a dozen or so other lakes in western Maine, you always set your brake. And listen to the rest of Don't Worry Baby, which I've always thought was the best of the Beach Boys songs. Yeah? Great, not in spite of the sappy lyrics, but because of them. If you knew how much I love you, baby, Brian Wilson sings, nothing could go wrong with you. And oh, folks, wouldn't that be a world? I sat there listening and looked at the cabinet set against the right side of the stoop. We kept our garage in there to foil the neighborhood raccoons. Even cans with snap-down lids won't always do that. If the coons are hungry enough, they'll somehow manage the lids with their clever little hands. Oh, we kept we kept our garage. Yeah, we kept our garbage in there. Good Lord. You're not going to do what you're thinking of doing, I told myself. I mean, are you? It seemed I was, or that I was at least going to have to go. When the Beach Boys gave way to rare earth, I got out of the car, opened the storage cabinet, and pulled out 2 plastic garbage cans. There was a guy named Stan Prolks who came down to yank the trash twice a week. Or was 4 years ago, I reminded myself, when a building's far-flung network of part-timers working for cash off the books. But I didn't think Stan would have been down to collect the current accumulation of swill because of the holiday, and I was right. There were 2 plastic garbage bags in each can. I hauled them out, cursing myself for a fool even while I was doing it, and untwisted the yellow ties. I really don't think I was so obsessed that I would have dumped a bunch of wet garbage out onto my stoop if it had come to that. Of course, I'll never know for sure, and maybe that's for the best. No one had lived in the house for 4 years, remember, and its occupancy that produces garbage, everything from coffee grounds to used sanitary napkins. The stuff in these bags was dry trash swept together and carted out by Brenda McSurv's cleaning crew. There were 9 vacuum cleaner disposal bags containing 48 months of dust, dirt, and dead flies. There were wads of paper towels, some smelling of aromatic furniture polish and others of the sharper but still pleasant aroma of Windex. There was moldy mattress pad and a silk jacket which had that unmistakable dined upon by moths look. The jacket certainly caused me no regrets, the mistake of my younger manhood. It looked like something from the Beatles' I Am a Walrus era. Goo Goo Jube Baby. There was a box filled with broken glass, another filled with unrecognizable and presumably out-of-date plumbing fixtures, a torn and filthy square of carpet, done-to-death dish towels, faded and ragged, the old oven gloves I'd used when cooking burgers and chicken on the barbecue. The sticker was in a twist at the bottom of the second bag. I'd known I would find it. From the moment I'd felt that faintly tacky patch on the sign, I'd known. But I needed to see it for myself, the same way old Doubting Thomas had needed to get the blood under his fingernails, I suppose. I placed my find on a board of the sun-warmed stoop and smoothed it out with my hand. It was shredded around the edges. I guess Bill had probably used a putty knife to scrape it off. He hadn't wanted Mr. Noonan to come back to the lake after 4 years and discover some beard-up kid had slapped a radio station sticker on his driveway sign. Gory, no. It wouldn't be proper, duh. So off it had come, and into the trash it had gone, and here it was again, another piece of my nightmare unearthed, and not much the worse for wear. I ran my fingers over it. WBLM 102.9, Portland's rock and roll blimp. I told myself I didn't have to be afraid, that it meant nothing, just as all the rest of it meant nothing. Then I got to the broom out of the cabinet, swept all the trash together, and dumped it back in the plastic bags. The sticker went in with the rest. I went outside, meaning to shower the dust and grime away. I went inside, meaning to shower the dust and grime away, then spied my own bathing suit still lying in one of my open suitcases, and decided to go swimming instead. The suit was a jolly number, covered with spouting whales, that I had purchased in Key Largo. I thought my pal at the Bow Sox cap would have approved. I checked my watch and saw that I had finished my village burger 45 minutes ago, close enough to government work, Kimosabi, especially after engaging in an energetic game of trash bag treasure hunt. I pulled on my suit and walked down the railroad tie steps, which led from Sara to the water. My flip-flops snapped and flapped. A few late mosquitoes hummed. The lake gleamed in front of me, still and inviting under the low, humid sky. Running north and south along its edge, bordering the entire east side of the lake, was a right-of-way path. It's called common property in the deeds, which folks on the TR simply call the street. If one were to turn left onto the street at the foot of the steps, one could walk all the way down to the dark score marina, passing Warrington's and Buddy Jellison's scuzzy little eatery on the way, not to mention 4 dozen summer cottages discreetly tucked into sloping groves of spruce and pine. Turn right and you would walk to Halo Bay, although it would take you a day to do it with the street overgrown the way it is now. I stood there for a moment on the path, then ran forward and leaped into the water. Even as I flew through the air with the greatest of ease, it occurred to me that the last time I had jumped in like this, I had been holding my wife's hand. Touching down was almost a catastrophe. The water was cold enough to remind me that I was 40, not 14. And for a moment, my heart stopped dead in my chest. As Dark Score Lake closed over my head, I felt quite sure that I wasn't going to come up alive. I'd be found drifting face down between the swimming float and my little stretch of the street, a victim of cold water and a greasy village burger. They'd carve your mother always said to wait at least an hour on my tombstone. Then my feet landed in the stones and slimy weed stuff growing along the bottom. My heart kick-started and I shoved upward like a guy planning to slam dunk home the last score of a close basketball game. As I returned to the air, I gasped. Water went in my mouth and I coughed it back out, patting one hand against my chest in an effort to encourage my heart. Come on, baby, keep going, you can do it. I came down again, standing waist deep in the lake, and with my mouth full of that cold taste. Lake water with an undertinge of minerals, the kind you'd have to correct for when you wash your clothes. It was exactly what I had tasted while standing on the shoulder of Route 68. It was what I had tasted when Maddie DeVore told me her daughter's name. I made a psychological connection, that's all, from the similarity of the names to my dead wife to this lake, which I have tasted a time or two before, I said out loud, as if to underline the fact. I scooped up the palmful of water, some of the cleanest and clearest in the state, according to the analysis reports I and all the other members of the so-called Western Lakes Association get each year, and drank it down. There was no revelation, no sudden weird flashes in my head. It was just dark score, first in my mouth and then in my stomach. I swam out to the float, climbed the 3-rung ladder on the side, and flopped on the hot boards, feeling suddenly very glad I had come, in spite of everything. Tomorrow I would start putting together some sort of life down here, trying to, anyway. For now, it was enough to be lying with my head on a crook of one arm, on the verge of a doze, confident that the day's adventures were over. As it happened, that was not quite true. During our first summer on the TR, Joe and I discovered it was possible to see the Castle Rock fireworks show from the deck overlooking the lake. I remembered this just as it was drawing down toward dark, and thought that this year I would spend that time in the living room watching a movie on the video player, reliving all the 4th of July twilights we had spent out there. Drinking beer and laughing as the big ones went off would be a bad idea. I was lonely enough without that, lonely in a way of which I had not been conscious in Derry. Then I wondered what I had come down here for, if not to finally face Joanna's memory, all of it, and put it to loving rest. Certainly the possibility of writing again had never seemed more distant than it did that night. There was no beer, I had forgotten to get a six-pack earlier at the general store or at the village cafe. But there was soda, courtesy of Brenda Meserve. I got a can of Pepsi, settled in to watch the light show, hoping it wouldn't hurt too much. Hoping, I supposed, that I wouldn't cry. Not that I was kidding myself. There were more tears here, all right. I just have to get through them. The first explosion of the night had just gone off. A, a spangly burst of blue with a bang traveling far behind. When the phone rang, it made me jump as a faint explosion of Castle Rock had not. I decided it was probably Bill Dean calling long distance to see if I was settling in all right. In the summer before Joe died, we'd gotten a wireless phone so we could prowl the downstairs while we talked. A thing we both liked to do. I went through the sliding glass door into the living room, punched the pickup button, and said, "Hello, this is Mike," as I went back to my deck chair and sat down. Far across the lake, exploding below the low clouds hanging over Castle View were green and yellow starbursts, followed by soundless flashes that would eventually reach me as noise. For a moment there was nothing but the phone, and then a man's raspy voice, an elderly voice, but not Bill Dean's. Said, "Noonan. Mr. Noonan?" Yes." A huge spangle of gold lit up the west, shivering the low clouds with brief filigree. It made me think of the awards show you see on television, all those beautiful women in shining dresses. "DeVore?" "Yes," I said again, cautiously. "Max DeVore." "We don't see him in here too often," Audrey had said. I had taken that for Yankee wit, but apparently she'd been serious. Wonders never cease. Okay, what next? I was total loss for conversation gambits. I thought of asking him how he got my number, which was unlisted, but what would be the point? When you were worth over $500 million, if you really wanted the Max DeVore, if this really was the Max DeVore I was talking to, you could get any old unlisted number you wanted. I settled for saying yes again, this time without a little up tilt at the end. Another silence followed. When I broke it and began asking questions, he would be in charge of the conversation, if we could be said to be having a conversation at that point. The old gambit, but I had the advantage of my long association with Harold Oblonsky to fall back on. Harold, master of the pregnant pause. I sat tight, cunning little cordless phone to my ear, and watched the show in the west. Red bursting into blue, green into gold, unseen women walking the clouds in glowing award show evening dresses. "I understand you met my daughter-in-law today," he said at last. He sounded annoyed. "I may have done," I said, trying not to sound surprised. "May I ask why you're calling, Mr. DeVore?" "I understand there was an incident." White lights danced in the sky. They could have been exploding spacecraft, then trailing after the bangs. "I have discovered the secret of time travel," I thought. "It's an auditory phenomenon." My hand was holding the phone far too tightly, and I made it relax. Max DeVore, $500 million, not in Palm Springs as I had supposed, but close. Right here on the TR. If the characteristic underhum on the line could be trusted. "I'm concerned for my granddaughter." His voice was raspier than ever. He was angry, and it showed. This was a man who hadn't had to conceal his emotions in a lot of years. "I understand my daughter-in-law's attention wandered again. It wanders often." Now 6 colored starbursts lit the night, blooming like flowers in the old Disney nature film. I could imagine the crowds gathered on the castle view, sitting cross-legged on their blankets, eating ice cream cones and drinking beer, and all going ooh at the same time. That's what makes any successful work of art, I think. Everybody goes ooh at the same time. "You're scared of this guy, aren't you?" Joe asked. "Okay, maybe you're right to be scared. A man who feels he can be angry whenever he wants to be, wants to at whoever he wants to. That's a man who can be dangerous." Then Maddie's voice, Mr. Noonan, I'm not a bad mother. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Of course, that's what most bad mothers say in such circumstances, I imagined, but I had believed her. Also, God damn it, my number was enlisted. I've been sitting here with a soda watching the fireworks, bothering nobody, and this guy had... Mr. DeVore, I don't have any idea what... Don't give me that. With all due respect, don't give me that, Mr. Noonan. You were seen talking to them. He sounded as I imagined Joe McCarthy sounded to these poor schmucks who ended up being branded dirty commies when they came before his committee. Be careful, Mike, Joe said. Beware of Maxwell's silver hammer. I did see and speak to a woman and a little girl this morning, I said. I presume they're the ones you're talking about? No, you saw a toddler walking on the road alone, he said. And then you saw a woman chasing after her, my daughter-in-law, in that old thing she drives. The child could have been run down. Why are you protecting that young woman, Mr. Noonan? Did she promise you something? You're certainly doing the child no favors, I can tell you that much. She promised to take you back to the trailer and then take me around the world, I thought of saying. She promised to keep her mouth open and the whole time if I'd keep mine shut. Is that what you want to hear? Yes, Joe said. Very likely that is what he wants to hear. Very likely what he wants to believe. Don't let him provoke you into a burst of your sophomore sarcasm, Mike. You could regret it. Why was I bothering to protect Maddie DeVore anyway? I didn't know. Didn't have the slightest idea of what I might be getting into here, for that matter. I knew only that she had looked tired and the child hadn't been bruised or frightened or sullen. There was a car, an old Jeep. That's more like it, satisfaction and sharp interest, greed almost. What did... I guess I assumed they came in the car together, I said. There was a certain giddy pleasure in discovering my capacity for invention had not deserted me. I felt like a pitcher who can no longer do it in front of a crowd, but can still throw a pretty good slider in the old backyard. The little girl might have had some daisies, all the careful qualifications, as if I were testifying in court instead of sitting on my deck. Harold would have been proud. Well, no. Harold would have been horrified that I was having such a conversation at all. I think I assumed they were picking wildflowers. My memory of the incident isn't all that clear, unfortunately. I'm a writer, Mr. DeVore, and when I'm driving, I often drift off into my own private... You're lying. The anger was right out in the open now, bright and pulsing like a boil. As I had suspected, it hadn't taken much effort to escort this guy past the social niceties. Mr. DeVore, my computer, Mr. DeVore, I assume. The computer, Mr. DeVore, I assume. You assume correctly. Joe always grew cooler in tone and expression as her non-inconsiderable temper grew hotter. Now I heard myself emulating her in a way that was frankly eerie. Mr. DeVore, I'm not accustomed to being called in the evening by men I don't know. Nor do I intend to prolong the conversation when a man who does so calls me a liar. Good evening, sir. If everything was fine, then why did you stop? I've been away from the TR for some time, and I wanted to know if the village cafe was still open. Oh, by the way, I don't know where you got my telephone number, but I know where you can put it. Good night. I broke the connection with my thumb and then just looked at the phone as if I had seen such a gadget, had never seen such a gadget in my life. The hand holding it was trembling. My heart was beating hard. I could feel it in my neck and wrists, as well as my chest. I wondered if I could have told DeVore to stick my phone number up his ass if I hadn't had a million rattling around in my bank myself. If I hadn't had a few million rattling around the bank myself. The Battle of the Titans, dear, Jo said in her cool voice. And all over a teen girl in a trailer. She didn't even have any breasts to speak of. I laughed out loud. War of the Titans, hardly. Some old robber baron from the turn of the century had said, these days a man with $1 million thinks he's rich. DeVore would likely have the same opinion of me, and in the wider scheme of things, he would be right. Now, the western sky was alit with unnatural, pulsing color. It was the finale. What was that all about? I asked. No answer, only a loon calling across the lake, protesting all the unaccustomed noise in the sky, as likely as not. I got up, went inside, and put the phone back on the charging cradle, realizing that as I did that, I was expecting it to ring again, expecting Devore to start spouting movie cliches. If you get in my way, and I'm warning you, friend, not to, and let me give you a piece of good advice before you, blah, blah, blah. The phone didn't ring. I poured the rest of my soda down my gullet, which was understandably dry, and decided to go to bed. At least there hadn't been any weeping and wailing out there on the deck. Devore had pulled me out of myself. In a weird way, I was grateful to him. I went into the north bedroom, undressed, and lay down. I thought about the little girl Kira and the mother who could have been her older sister. Devore was pissed at Maddie, that much was clear. And if I was a financial nunnity to the guy, what must she be to him? And what kind of resources would she have if he had taken against her? That was a pretty nasty thought, actually, and it was one I fell asleep on. I got up 3 years later to eliminate the can of soda I was unwisely drowned. I I had unwisely downed before retiring, and as I stood before the bowl, pissing with one eye open, I heard the sobbing again. A child somewhere in the dark, lost and frightened. Or perhaps just pretending to be lost and frightened. Don't, I said. I was standing naked before the toilet bowl, my back alive with goose flesh. Please don't start up with this shit, it's scary. The crying dwindled, as it had before, seeming to diminish like something carried down a tunnel. I went back to bed, turned on my side, and closed my eyes. It was a dream, I said. Just another Manderley dream. I knew better, but I also knew I was going back to sleep, and right then, that seemed like the important thing. And as I drifted off, I thought in a voice that was purely my own, she is alive. Sara is alive. And I understood something too. She belonged to me. I had reclaimed her. For good or ill, I had come home. Chapter 9. At 9 o'clock the following morning, I filled a squeeze bottle with grapefruit juice, and set out for a good long walk south along the street. The day was bright and already hot. It was also silent, the kind of silence you experience only after a Saturday holiday, I think, one composed of equal parts holiness and hangover. I could see 2 or 3 fishermen parked far out on the lake, but not a single powerboat bird, not a single gaggle of kids shouted and splashed. I passed half a dozen cottages on the slope above me, and although all of them were likely inhabited at this time of year, the only signs of life I saw were bathing suits hung on the deck rail at the palisades and a half-deflated fluorescent green seahorse at the bachelor's stub of a dock. The Passendales, not the Palisades. The Passendales. But did the Passendales' little gray cottage still belong to the Passendales? Did the bachelor's amusing circular summer camp with its cinema picture window pointing at the lake and the mountains beyond still belong to the bachelors? No way of telling, of course. 4 years can bring a lot of changes. I walked and made no effort to think. An old trick from my writing days. Work your body, rest your mind, let the boys in the basement do their jobs. I made my way past camps where Joe and I had once had drinks and barbecues and attended the occasional card party. I soaked up the silence like a sponge. I drank my juice. I armed sweat off my forehead, and I waited to see what thoughts might come. The first was an old realization that the crying child in the night seemed somehow more real than the call from Max Devore. Had I actually been phoned by a rich man, obviously bad-tempered, techno mogul on my first full evening back at the TR? Had said mogul actually called me a liar at one point? I was considering the tale I had told, but that was beside the point. I knew it had happened, but it was actually easier to believe that the ghost of the Darkscore Lake, believe in the ghost of the Darkscore Lake, known around some campfires as the mysterious crying kitty. My next thought, this was just before I finished my juice, was that I should call Maddie DeVore and tell her what had happened. I decided it was a natural impulse, but probably a bad idea. I was too old to believe in such simplicities as the damsel in distress versus the wicked stepfather, or in this case, father-in-law. I had my fish to fry this summer, and I didn't want to complicate my job by getting into a potentially ugly dispute between Mr. Computer and Mrs. Doublewide. DeVore had rubbed my fur the wrong way, and vigorously, but that probably wasn't personal, only something he did as a matter of course. She must be laying down. Hey, some guys snap bra straps. Do I want to get in his face on this? No, I did not. I had saved little Miss Red Socks. I had gotten myself an inadvertent feel of Mom's small but pleasantly firm breast. I had learned that Kira was Greek for ladylike. Any more than that would be gluttony, by God. I stopped at that point, feet as well as brain, realizing I'd walked all the way to Warrington's, a vast barn-board structure, which locals sometimes called the country club. It was, sort of. There was a six-hole golf course, a stable, and riding trails, a restaurant, a bar, and lodging for perhaps 3 dozen in the main building, and 8 or 9 satellite cabins. There was even a 2-lane bowling alley, although you and your competition had to take turns setting up the pins. Warrington's had been built around the beginning of World War I. That made it younger than Sara Laughs, but not by much. A long dock led out to a smaller building called the Sunset Bar. It was there that Warrington's summer guests would gather for drinks at the end of the day, and some for Bloody Marys at the beginning. And when I glanced out that way, I realized I was no longer alone. There was a woman standing on the porch to the left of the floating bar's door, watching me. She gave me a pretty good jump. My nerves weren't in the best condition right then, and that probably had something to do with it. But I think she would have given me a jump in any case. Part of it was her stillness. Part was her extraordinary thinness. Most of it was her face. Have you ever seen that Edvard Munch drawing The Cry? Well, if you imagine that screaming face at rest, mouth closed, eyes watchful, you'll have a pretty good idea of the woman standing at the end of the dock with one long-fingered hand resting on the rail. Although I must tell you that my first thought was not Edvard Munch, but Mrs. Danvers. She looked about 70 and was wearing black shorts over a black tank bathing suit. The combination looked strangely formal, a variation of a ever-popular little black cocktail dress. Her skin was cream white, except above her neatly flat bosom and along her bony shoulders. There it swam with large brown age spots. Her face was a wedge featuring prominent skull-like cheekbones and an unlined lamp of brow. Beneath that bulge, her eyes were lost in sockets of shadow. White hair hung scant and lank around her ears and down to the prominent shelf of her jaw. Hi! How you doing, Pax? Took you long enough. Hopefully you're getting your food. Yes, it's been a while. Where the heck have you been? We're going to have to talk when I'm done reading. We are on Bag of Bones. We're in chapter 9. I'm not sure. I haven't looked up to see who all was here. Her eyes were lost in sockets of shadow. White hair hung scant and lank around her ears and down to the prominent shelf of her jaw. God, she's thin, I thought. She's nothing but a bag of... A shudder twisted through me at that. It was a strong one, as if someone was spinning a wire in my flesh. I didn't want her to notice it. What a way to start a summer day, by revolting a guy so badly that he stood there shaking and grimacing in front of you. So I raised my hand and waved. I tried to smile as well. Hello there, lady standing out by the floating bar. Hello there, you old bag of bones. You scared the living shit out of me, but it doesn't take much these days, and I forgive you. How the fuck you doing? I wonder if my smile looked as much like a grimace to her as it felt to me. She didn't wave back, feeling quite a bit like a fool. There's no village idiot here. We all take turns. I ended my wave in a kind of half-assed salute and headed back the way I'd come. 5 steps, and I had to look over my shoulder. The sensation of her watching me was so strong, it was like a hand pressing between my shoulder blades. The dock where she'd been was completely deserted. I squinted my eyes, at first sure she must have just retreated deeper into the shadow thrown by the little booze house. But she was gone, as if she had been a ghost herself. She stepped into the bar, hun, Joe said. You know that, don't you? I mean, you do know it, right? Right, I muttered. Setting off north along the street, toward home. Of course I do. Where else? Except it didn't seem to me that there had been time. It didn't seem to me that she could have stepped in, even in her bare feet, without me hearing her. Not on such a quiet morning. Joe again. Perhaps she's stealthy. Yes, I murmured. I did a lot of thinking out loud before that summer was over. Yes, perhaps she is. Perhaps she's stealthy. Sure, like Mrs. Danvers. I stopped again and looked back, but the right-of-way path had followed the lake along a little bit of curve, and I could no longer see either Worthington's or the Sunset Bar. And really, I thought, that was just as well. On my way back, I tried to list the oddities which had preceded that and then surrounded my return to Sara Laughs. The repeating dreams, the sunflowers, the radio station sticker, the weeping in the night. I suppose that my encounter with Maddie and Kira, plus the follow-up phone call from Mr. Pixel Easel, also qualified as passing strange, but not in the same way as a child you heard sobbing in the night. And what about the fact that we had been in Derry instead of on Dark Score when Joanna died? Did that qualify for the list? I didn't know. I couldn't even remember why that was. In the fall of winter of 93, I'd been fiddling with a screenplay for The Red Shirt Man. In February of 94, I got going on All the Way from the Top, and that absorbed most of my attention. Besides, deciding to go west to the TR, west to Sara, that was Joe's job, I told the day, and as soon as I heard the words, I understood how true they were. Yeah?
Are you making that noise because you're irritated with me interrupting your streams?
No.
Can I interrupt your stream more?
I had a thing. I've been doing that. What's up?
Oh, I need to clean out my ear.
Okay, I'm going to keep reading. We both loved the old girl, but saying, hey, Irish, let's get our asses over to the TR for a few days.
Oh, those chocolate bars?
Yeah, had been Joe's job. Don't touch the almond. But you can have a crisp or a chocolate. You have to leave 2 almond, one for me and one for Dad. Yeah, there's almond, crisp, and chocolate. How many almond are there?
2 almond.
2 crisp? Yep.
I'm gonna take a crisp.
Alright. Okay. We both loved the old girl, but saying, hey, Irish, let's get our asses over to the TR for a few days had been Joe's job.
Ass. Yeah. This is a very controversial writer.
Oh, the F word is more.
Wow.
She might
check out it.
I don't think I have that book. I don't think I have that book.
It's right behind you.
Wait, do I have it? Where?
The big black book.
That's what that is. We're going to read that one. Just after this one, maybe. She might say it any time, except in the year before her death. She hadn't said it once. And I had never thought to say it for her. Had somehow forgotten all about Sara Laughs, it seemed. Even when summer came around. Was it possible to be that absorbed in a writing project? It didn't seem likely, but what other explanation was there? Something was very wrong with this picture, and I didn't know what it was. Not from nothing. That made me think of Sarah Tidwell and the lyrics in one of her songs. She had never been recorded, but I owned the Blind Lemon Jefferson version of this particular tune. One verse went, "It ain't nothing but a barn dance, sugar. It ain't nothing but a round and round. Let me kiss you on your sweet sugar lips. You're the good thing that I found." I loved that song, and I had always wondered how it would have sounded coming out of a woman's mouth instead of from the whiskey-voiced old troubadour. Out of Sarah Tidwell's mouth, I bet she sang sweet, and boy, I bet she could swing it. I had gotten back to my own place again. I looked around, saw no one in the immediate vicinity, although I could now hear the day's first ski boat burring away down water. Stripped to my underpants and swam out to the float. I didn't climb it, only lay beside it holding onto the ladder with one hand and lazily kicking my feet. Can we turn it down just a little? It was nice enough, but what was I going to do with the rest of the day? I decided to spend it cleaning my work area on the second floor. When that was done, maybe I'd go out and look around in Joe's studio. If I didn't lose my courage, that was. I swam back, kicking easily along, raising my head in and out of the water, which flowed along my body like cool silk. I felt like an otter. I was most of the way to the shore when I raised my dripping face and saw a woman standing on the street, watching me. She was as thin as the one I'd seen at Warrington's, but this one was green. Green and pointing north along the path, like a dryad in some old legend. I gasped, swallowed water, coughed it back out. I stood up in chest-deep water and wiped my streaming eyes. Then I laughed, albeit a little doubtfully. The woman was green because she was a birch growing a little to the north of where my set of railroad tie steps ended the street. And even with my eyes clear of water, there was something creepy about how the leaves along the ivory streaked with black trunk almost made a peering face. The air was perfectly still, and so the face was perfectly still as the face of the woman in the black shorts and bathing suit had been. But on a breezy day, it had seemed to smile and frown, or perhaps to laugh. Behind it there grew a sickly pine. One bare branch jutted off to the north. It was this I had mistaken for a skinny arm and a bony, pointing hand. It wasn't the first time I'd spooked myself like that. I see things, that's all. Write enough stories, and every shadow on the floorboard looks like a footprint. Every line in the dirt like a secret message. Which did not, of course, ease the task of deciding what was really peculiar at Sara Laughs and what was peculiar only because my mind was peculiar. I glanced around while she's eating a bottom. I glanced around, saw I still had this part of the lake to myself, although not for much longer. The bee buzz of the first power boat had been joined by the second and third, and stripped off my soggy underpants. I wrung them out, put them on top of my shorts and t-shirt, and walked naked up the railroad tie steps, with my clothes held against my chest. I pretended I was Bunter, bringing breakfast and in the morning paper to Lord Peter Wimsey. By the time I got back inside the house, I was grinning like a fool. The second floor was stifling in spite of the open windows, and I saw why as soon as I got to the top of the stairs. Jo and I had shared space up here. She on the left, only a little room, really just a cubby, which was all she needed with the studio north of the house. Me on the right. At the far end of the hall was a grilled snout of a monster air conditioning unit we'd bought the year after we bought the lodge. Looking at it, I realized I had missed its characteristic hum without even being aware of it. There was a sign taped to it which said, Mr. Noonan, broken, blows hot air when you turn it on, and sounds full of broken glass. Dean says the part it needs is promised from Western Auto in Castle Rock. I'll believe it when I see it. B. Misserve. I grinned at that last. It was Mrs. M, right down to the ground, and then tried the switch. Machinery often responds favorably when it senses a penis-equipped human in the vicinity, Joe used to claim. But not this time. I listened to the air conditioner grind for 5 seconds or so, then snapped it off. Damn thing shit the bed, as TR folks like to say. And until it was fixed, I wouldn't even be doing crossword puzzles up here. I looked in my office just the same, as curious as what I might feel about what I might find. The answer was next to nothing. There was the desk where I had finished The Red Shirt Man, thus proving to myself that the first time wasn't a fluke. There was a photo of Richard Nixon, arms raised, flashing the double V for victory sign, with the caption, "Would you buy a used car from this man?" running beneath. There was a rag rug Jo had hooked for me a winter or two before she had discovered the wonderful world of Afghans and pretty much gave up hooking. It wasn't quite the office of a stranger, but every item, most of all, the weirdly empty surface of the desk, said that it was the workspace of an earlier generation Mike Noonan. Men's lives, I had read once, are usually defined by two primary forces, work and marriage. In my life, the marriage was over, and the career was on what appeared to be a permanent hiatus. Given that, it didn't seem strange to me that now the space where I'd spent so many days, usually in a state of real happiness, as I made up various imaginary lives, seemed to mean nothing. It was like looking at the office of an employee who had been fired or who had died suddenly. Let me check something. I started to leave and then had an idea. The filing cabinet in the corner was crammed with papers, bank statements, most 8 or 10 years out of date, correspondence, mostly never answered, a few story fragments, but I didn't find what I was looking for. I moved on to the closet, where the temperature had to be at least 110 degrees, and in a cardboard box, which Mrs. M had marked gadgets, I unearthed it. A Sony memo scriber Deborah Weinstock gave me at the conclusion of our work on the first of the Putnam books. It could be set to turn itself on when you started to talk. It dropped into pause mode when you stopped to think. I never asked Deborah if the thing just caught her eye and she thought, why, I'll bet any self-respecting popular novelist would enjoy owning one of these babies, or if it was something a little more specific, some sort of hint, perhaps. Verbalize those little faxes of your subconscious while they're still fresh, Noonan. I hadn't known then and didn't now, but I had it, a genuine pro-quality dictating machine, and there were at least a dozen cassette tapes in my car. Home dubs I'd made to listen to while driving. I thought I would insert one into the memo scriber tonight, slide the volume control as high as it would go, and put the machine in its dictate mode. Then if the noise I'd heard at least twice now repeated itself, I would have it on tape. I could play it for Bill Dean and ask him what he thought it was. What if I hear the sobbing child tonight and the machine never kicks on? Well then, I'll know something else. I told the empty, sunlit office. I was standing there in the doorway with the memo scriber under my arm, looking at the empty desk and sweating like a pig. Or at least suspect it. Joe's nook across the hall made my office seem crowded and homey by comparison. Never full, it was now nothing but a square room shaped space. The rug was gone, her photos were gone, even the desk was gone. This looked like a do-it-yourself project which had been abandoned after 90% of the work had been done. Joe had been scraped out of it, and it felt a moment's unreasonable anger at Brenda McServe. I thought of what my mother usually said when I'd done something on my own initiative, of which she disapproved. You took a little bit too much on yourself, didn't you? That was my feeling about Joe's little bit of office, that in emptying it to the walls this way, Mrs. McServe had taken a little too much on herself. Maybe it wasn't Mrs. M who cleaned it out, the UFO voice said. Maybe Joe did it herself. Ever think of that, sport? That's stupid, I said. Why would she? I hardly think she had a premonition of her own death, considering she'd just bought. But I didn't want to say it, not out loud. It seemed like a bad idea somehow. I turned to leave the room, and a sudden sigh of cool air, amazing in that heat, brushed past the sides of my face. Not my body, just my face. It was the most extraordinary sensation, like hands patting briefly, both gently at my cheeks and forehead. At the same time, there was a sighing in my ears, except it's not quite right. It was a susurrus that went past my ears, like a whispered message spoken in a hurry. I turned, expecting to see the curtains over the room's window in motion, but they hung perfectly straight. Joe? I said, and hearing my name made me shiver so violently that I almost dropped. Hearing her name made me shiver so violently that I almost dropped the memo scriber. Joe, was that you? Nothing. No phantom hand patting my skin, no motion from the curtains, which there certainly would have been if there had been an actual draft. All was quiet. There was only a tall man with a sweaty face and a tape recorder under his arm, standing in the doorway of a bare room. But that was when I first began to really believe that I wasn't alone in Sara Laughs. So what? I asked myself. Even if it should be true, so what? Ghosts can't hurt anyone. That's what I thought then. When I visited Joe's studio, her air-conditioned studio, after lunch, I felt quite a lot better about Brenda McServe. She hadn't taken too much on herself after all. The few times I'd especially remembered from Joe's little office, the framed square of a first Afghan, the green rag rug, or framed poster depicting the wildflowers of Maine, had been put out here, along with almost everything else I remembered. It was as if Mrs. M had sent a message. I can't ease your pain or shorten your sadness, but I can't prevent the wounds that are coming back here may reopen. But I can put all the stuff that may hurt you in one place so that you won't be stumbling over it unexpected or unprepared. I can do that much. Out here were no bare walls. Out here the walls jostled with my wife's spirit and creativity. There were knitted things, some serious, many whimsical, batik squares, rag dolls popping out of what she called my baby collages, an abstract desert painting made from strips of yellow, black, and orange silk. Her flower photographs, even on the top of her bookshelf, what appeared to be construction in progress, ahead of Sara Laughs herself. It was made out of toothpicks and lollipop sticks. In the corner of her little loom, and a wooden cabinet with a sign reading Joe's knitting stuff, no trespassing, hung over the pool knob. In another was the banjo she had tried to learn and then given up on, saying it hurt her fingers too much. In a third was the kayak paddle and a pair of rollerblades with scuffed toes and a little purple pom-poms on the tips of the laces. The thing which caught and held my eye was sitting on the old roll-top desk in the center of the room. During my many good summers, Tristan, please turn it down a little. During the many good summers, falls, and winter weekends we had spent here, that desktop would have been littered with spools of thread, skeins of yarn, pincushions, sketches, maybe a book about Spanish Civil War or famous American dogs. Joanna could be aggravating, at least to me, because she imposed no real system or order on what she did. She could also be daunting, even overwhelming at times. She was a brilliant scatterbrain, and her desk had always reflected that. But not now. It was possible to think that Mrs. M had cleaned the litter from the top of it and plunked down what was now there, but impossible to believe. Why would she? It made no sense. The object was covered with a gray plastic hood. I reached out to touch it, and my hand faltered an inch or two short of a memory of an old dream. Give me that, it's my dust catcher, slipped across my mind, much as that queer draft had slipped across my face. Then it was gone, and I pulled the plastic cover off. Underneath it was my old green IBM Selectric, which I hadn't seen or thought of in years. I leaned closer, knowing that the typewriter ball would be Courier, my old favorite, even before I saw it. What in God's name was my old typewriter doing out here? Joanna painted, although not very well. She took photographs, very good ones indeed, and sometimes sold them. She knitted, she crocheted, she wove, and dyed cloth. She could play 8 or 10 basic chords on a guitar. She could write, of course. Most English majors can, which is why they became English majors. Did she demonstrate any blazing degree of literary creativity? No. No. After a few experiments with poetry as an undergrad, she gave up that particular branch of the arts as a bad job. You write for the both of us, Mike, she had said once. That's all yours. I'll just take a little taste of everything else. Given the quality of her poems as opposed to the quality of her silks, photographs, and knitted art, I thought that was probably wise. But here was my old IBM. Why? Letters, I said. She found it down cellar or something and rescued it to write letters on. Except that wasn't Jo. She showed me most of her letters, often urging me to write little postscripts of my own, guilt-tripping me with that old saying about how the shoemaker's kids always go barefoot, and the writer's friends would never hear from him if it weren't for Alexander Graham Bell, she was apt to add. I hadn't seen a typed personal letter from my wife in all the time we'd been married. If nothing else, she would have considered it shitty etiquette. She could type, producing mistake-free business letters slowly yet methodically, but she always used my desktop computer or her own PowerBook for those chores. What are you up to, hon? I asked. Began to investigate her desk drawers. Brenda Meserve had made an effort with these, but Jo's fundamental nature had defeated her. Surface order, spools of thread segregated by color, and for instance, quickly gave way to Jo's old dear jumble. I found enough of her in those drawers to hurt my heart with 100 unexpected memories. But I found no paperwork, which had been typed on my old IBM, with or without the courier ball. Not so much as a single page. When I was finished with my hunt, I leaned back in my chair, her chair, and looked at the little framed photo on her desk. One I couldn't remember ever having seen before. Jo had most likely printed it herself, The original might have come out of some local's attic, and then hand-tinted the result. The final product looked like a wanted poster, colorized by Ted Turner. I picked it up and ran the ball of my thumb over the glass facing, amused. Sarah Tidwell, the turn-of-the-century blues shouter, whose last known port of call had been right here on TR90, when she and her folks, some of them friends, most of them relatives, and had left the TR, she had gone on to Castle Rock for a little while, then had simply disappeared, like a cloud over the horizon or a mist on a summer morning. She was smiling just a little in the picture, but the smile was hard to read. Her eyes were half closed. The string of her guitar, not a strap, but a string, was visible over her shoulder. In the background, I could see a black man wearing a derby at a killer angle. One thing about musicians, they really know how to wear hats. And standing beside what appeared to be a washtub bass. Joe had tinted Sarah's skin to a café a laute shade, maybe based on other pictures she'd seen. There are quite a few knocking around, most showing Sarah with her head thrown back and her hair hanging almost to her waist as she bellows out her famous carefree yell of a laugh, although none would have been in color. Not at the turn of the century. Sarah Tidwell hadn't just left her mark in old photographs either. I recall Dickie Brooks, owner of the all-purpose garage, once telling me that his father claimed he had won a teddy bear at the Castle County Fair's shooting pitch and to have given it to Sarah Tidwell. She had rewarded him, Dickie said, with a kiss. According to Dickie, the old man never forgot it. Said it was the best kiss of his life. Although I doubt if he said it to his wife's hearing. In this photo, she was only smiling. Sara Tidwell, known as Sara Laughs, never recorded, but her songs had lived just the same. One of them, Walk Me Baby, bears a remarkable resemblance to Walk This Way by Aerosmith. Today, the lady would be known as an African American. In 1984, when Joanna and I bought the lodge and consequently got interested in her, she would have been known as a black. In her own time, she would have been called a negress, or a darky, or possibly an octoroon, and a nigger, of course. There would have been plenty of folks free with that one. And did I believe that she had kissed Dickie Brooks' father, a white man, in front of half of Castle County? No, I did not. Still, who could say for sure? No one. This was the entrancing thing about the past. It ain't nothin' about a barn dance sugar, I sang, putting the picture back on the desk. It ain't nothing but a round and round. I picked up the typewriter cover, then decided to leave it off. As I stood, my eyes went back to Sarah, standing there with her eyes closed and the string which served as a guitar strap visible over one shoulder. Something in her face and smile had always struck me as familiar, and suddenly it came to me. She looked oddly like Robert Johnson, whose primitive licks hid behind the chords of almost every Led Zeppelin and Yardbirds song ever recorded, who, according to the legend, had gone down to the crossroads and sold his soul to Satan for 7 years of fast living, high-tension liquor, and street-life babies. And for a jute joint, brand of immortality, of course, which he had gotten, Robert Johnson supposedly poisoned over a woman. In the late afternoon, I went down to the store and saw a good-looking piece of flounder in the cold case. It looked like supper to me. I bought a bottle of white wine to go with it, and while I was waiting my turn at the cash register, a trembling old man's voice spoke up behind me. "See, you made a new friend yesterday." The Yankee accent was so thick that it sounded almost like a joke, except the accent itself was only part of it, mostly. I came to believe it's that sing-song tone real Mainers all sound like auctioneers. I turned and saw the geezer who had been standing out on the garage tarmac the day before, watching along with Dickie Brooks as I got to know Kira, Maddie, and Scouty. He still had the gold-headed cane, and I now recognized it. Sometime in the 1950s, the Boston Post had donated one of these canes to every county in the New England states. They were given to the oldest residents and passed along from old fart to old fart. And the joke of it was that the Post had gone toes up years ago. Actually, two new friends, I replied, trying to drudge up his name. I couldn't, but I remembered him from when Joe had been alive, holding down one of the overstuffed chairs in Dickie's waiting room, discussing weather and politics and weather, as the hammers wanged and the air compressor chugged, a regular. And if something happened out there on Highway 60, God, he was there to see it. I hear Matty DeVore can be quite a dear, he said. Herr DeVore, der, and one of his crusty eyelids drooped. I had seen a fair number of salacious winks in my time, but none that was a patch on the one tipped me by the old man with the gold-headed cane. I felt a strong urge to knock his waxy beak of a nose off. The sound of it parting company from his face would be like a crack of a dead branch breaking over a bent knee. Do you hear a lot, old-timer? I asked. Oh, yeah, he said, his lips dark as strips of liver, parted in a grin. His gums swarmed with white patches. He had a couple of yellow teeth still planted in the top one, and a couple more on the bottom. And she got a little one. Cunnin' she is. Cunnin' as a cat a-runnin', I agreed. He blinked at me, a little surprised to hear such an old one out of my presumably newfangled mouth. And then that reprehensible grin widened. Her don't mind her, though, he said. Baby got a run of the place, don't you know? I became aware, better belated than never, that half a dozen people were watching and listening to us. That wasn't my impression, I said, raising my voice a bit. No, that wasn't my impression at all. He only grinned, the old man's grin that says, "Aye, aye, dear. I know I'm worth two of that." I left the store feeling worried for Mattie DeVore. Too many people were minding her business, it seemed to me. When I got home, I took my bottle of wine into the kitchen. It would chill while I got the barbecue going out on the deck. I reached for the fridge door, then paused. Perhaps as many as 4 dozen little magnets had been scattered randomly across the front. Vegetables, fruits, plastic letters and numbers, even a good selection of California raisins. But they weren't random anymore. Now they formed a circle on the front of the refrigerator. Someone had been in here. Someone had come in and rearranged the magnets on the refrigerator? If so, that was a burglar who needed to do some heavy remedial work. I touched one of them gingerly with just the tip of my finger. Then suddenly angry with myself, I reached out and spread them again, doing it with enough force to knock a couple on the floor. I didn't pick them up. That night before going to bed, I placed the memo scriber on the table beneath Bunter, the great stuffed moose, turning it on and putting it in the dictate mode. Then I slipped in one of my old home-dubbed cassettes, zeroed the counter, and went to bed, where I slept without dreams or other interruption for 8 hours. The next morning, Monday, was the sort of day that tourists come to Maine for. The air so sunny, clean, that the hills across the lake seemed to be under subtle magnification. Mount Washington, New England's highest, floated in the farthest distance. I put on the coffee, then went into the living room, whistling. All my imaginings of the last few days seemed silly that morning. Then the whistle died away. The memo scriber counter, set to 0 when I went to bed, was now at 012. I rewound it, hesitated with my finger over the play button, told myself in Joe's voice not to be a fool, then pushed it. "Oh, Mike," a voice whispered, mourned almost, on the tape, and I found myself having to press the heel of my hand to my mouth to hold back a scream. It was what I had heard in Joe's office when the draft rushed past the sides of my face. Only now the words were slowed down just enough for me to understand them. "Oh, Mike," it said again. There was a faint click. The machine had shut down for some length of time, and then, once more, spoke in the living room as I had slept in the north wing. "Oh, Mike." Then it was gone. So, what do we think of that? Did anybody else get goosebumps? Like, goose flesh? Like, there's goosebumps all up and down my arms. Like, that is, wow. As soon as I heard that, in my mind, I could hear it like as a slow talk, a slow whisper as I was reading it. And it was just like, oh, now I'm going to get goosebumps, because you imagine it in her voice. Whatever her voice is to you, you imagine it. And that is just, wow. I am just, whoo. Yeah, that is really awesome. I think that's a good one, don't you guys think? So, we are up to chapter 10, and we will start that tomorrow morning. Hopefully I'll be up and running around by 10:30. I don't have to set my alarm tomorrow morning. Friday, let me check my phone real quick. I think I put it in yeah. Hold on. I want to make sure that Friday, let me double check my time. Okay, Friday I will do the same because my appointment's not until the afternoon, so that works out. Oh no. I don't know why that's being sent to me. Anyway, somebody sent me an advertisement for a house. I'm not planning on moving. Anywho, now that goosebumps. Ooh, I got goosebumps. I can't just get over it. Holy cow. Anyway, it is after 12, so we are going to go for the night. Everybody gets to sleep. If it's your daytime, enjoy your day. Because I'm in the Eastern Coast, so it is 12:05 for me. So y'all, if you want to join me tomorrow morning around 10:30, we will be then. If you guys want to join the Discord, let me know, and I will get you guys the link. So, yeah, I think it'd be great. I might actually even put the Discord link here. I'm not quite sure if I want to put it in my on my page, but I'll think about that. I really don't want to just have anybody joining it. I really want it to be people who are listening to the books, hear what we're talking about, and, keep our community really just our community. I don't want to sound mean or anything, but I really want to keep it about our reading for the moment. So, if there's anything else that we decide to do, maybe I'll put on there, rosary request or something. But for now, it's strictly just going to be us sitting here reading and enjoying ourselves. So that's what we're going to do. So I thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. I love y'all. Y'all have a good night. and follow me if you wish. It's up to you. If you haven't followed me already. And yeah, y'all have a good night. Get some sleep, get some rest, enjoy your day, whatever. And we will be seeing you. All right? Bye.